In spite of the fact that most people believe that virtually nothing in Washington ever changes, one thing does remain constant, and that is the fact that things always change, especially when it comes to big, beautiful bills that become big, beautiful laws. Just as we thought that NASA's goose was cooked, essentially, when it comes to funding for virtually all of their science-related projects, in spite of the fact that SLS and Orion, Lunar Gateway, that sort of thing seems to have been bailed out. Now we have a Senate appropriations bill that appears to be completely rejecting the administration's proposed cuts to NASA and returning them to 2025 levels, which makes me wonder whether or not these cuts were ever really Trump's idea, or rather Elon Musk's Doge department that seemed determined to cut a wide variety of departments with the exception of the military. But here's the current situation with this particular bill. The Senate Appropriations Committee was set to formally approve a Commerce, Justice, and Science spending bill during a July 10th markup session. Yes, there's things called markup sessions to add further spending to bills, along with two other appropriations bills. Senate appropriators follow an unusual process with these bills where they first vote on the bill itself and only then consider amendments, which is the reverse of the standard procedure. Committee members initially voted 21-6 in favor of the bill, indicating that there is bipartisan support to return NASA to its original funding levels, with the option to change their votes depending on the outcome of the amendments. That became an issue, however, when the committee voted 15-14 in favor of an amendment by Senator Chris Van Hollen, Democrat from Maryland, ranking member of the CJS subcommittee, that would prevent the administration from spending money set aside for a new headquarters for the Federal Bureau of Investigation for anything other than a previously approved plan, which called for a new facility in Greenbelt, Maryland. What the hell does that have to do with NASA spending? Well, nothing. And that's why amendments usually have nothing to do with actual bills, but are rather things that are added on to bills to satisfy powerful members of the Senate. The White House and current FBI leadership has sought to scrap that plan in favor of moving into an existing building in Washington. Later in the markup, Republican senators who had originally voted in favor of the bill changed their votes to no, and that prompted Senator Susan Collins, Republican from Maine, chair of the Appropriations Committee, to call an extended recess in an attempt to resolve the dispute. That recess is expected to extend until at least next week. With the markup session not yet complete, the committee has not released the CJS bill and accompanying report, but members indicated during the hearing that the bill largely rejected the nearly 25% cut in overall NASA spending that the White House proposed in May. Quote, "For NASA, the bill reflects an ambitious approach to space exploration, prioritizing the agency's flagship program, Artemis, and rejecting premature terminations of systems like SLS and Orion before commercial replacements are ready," said Senator Jerry Morgan, Republican from Kansas, chair of the CJS Appropriations Subcommittee. He added that the bill protects key science missions. Van Hollen said that the bill would provide $24.9 billion for NASA, slightly above the $24.875 billion that the agency received in 2025, and far more than the $18.8 billion that the administration offered in its fiscal year 2026 budget proposal. That included $7.3 billion for NASA science programs, which is the same as fiscal year 2025. And as I said, originally, this bill had bipartisan support, and it wouldn't have had that kind of support if Trump was opposed to the bill. So makes me wonder who wanted these cuts in the first place. Van Hollen went on to say, quote, "We rejected cuts that would have devastated NASA science by 47% and would have terminated 55 operating and planned missions." The debate offered few other details about NASA or other science agency budgets included in the bill. Both Moran and Van Hollen said that the bill rejected proposed cuts of more than 50% to the National Science Foundation, with Moran stating that the NSF budget would be cut by just $60 million, or less than 1% from 2025. Van Hollen added that the budget maintains plans for next-generation weather satellites at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, an apparent reference to the GEO-XO program that the White House sought to cut in both number of satellites and instruments on each satellite. During the markup, Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat from Illinois, introduced an amendment that would have prevented NASA from spending any funds in the bill for moving the Space Shuttle Discovery from the Smithsonian's Udvar-Hazy Center in Virginia to Houston. By the way, I actually have some footage of the Space Shuttle Discovery at Udvar-Hazy that I recorded a couple of years ago. I'm going to go ahead and link that video at the end of this one. The budget reconciliation bill enacted last week included $85 million for a, quote, space vehicle transfer intended to facilitate such a move. Durbin noted that the $85 million included is far short of estimates by NASA and the Smithsonian that such a move would cost more than $300 million, suggesting that agency funds might be tapped to cover the difference. However, he withdrew the amendment, a common maneuver when members want to raise a point for further debate, but indicated that he remained concerned about any such move. Quote, "I think we ought to think twice about this kind of approach. This is not a transfer, it's a heist." So there's our weekly dose of congressional weirdness, something that I do my best to avoid most of the time, but since this directly involves space, and since I strongly support the idea of returning NASA to its current level of funding at the very, very least, especially if we want to accomplish things like returning humans to the moon and also going all the way to Mars, none of those things are going to be possible at NASA's current spending level. So, even though this bill is held up in Congress, I think that there's still a chance that NASA may be saved by 2026 instead of gutted. I will keep you up to date on all of this. Keep in mind that these sorts of short bulletins are probably the sorts of things that I'm going to be releasing. I'm still in the process of recovering from this nasty infection. I think I'm on the mend, but nevertheless, it's taken a little longer than I was hoping it was going to. Thanks again for all of your well wishes and for your support for my upcoming trip to Australia. Until next time, I urge all of you to stay angry about space.